Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Gritta. I am the International Vice Justice for Phi Alpha Delta Law Fraternity International. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our latest installment of the P.A.D. webinar series, Starting Your Own Law Practice. A few housekeeping matters before we begin. You will see that our panelists are all presently unmuted. They may need to mute themselves for various reasons throughout. If that happens, give us a little grace as we get them unmuted. The rest of our attendees have been placed in a mute listen only mode, and that again is to make sure that we do not have a lot of background noise. I would encourage our attendees to view this in speaker mode so that they can see the attendee that is, or I'm sorry, the panelist that is speaking at any moment in time, rather than the Brady Bunch squares, unless you, like one of our panelists, Mr. Haber, prefers to see the Brady Bunch squares, which by all means, please do so. If you have any questions as we go through, which we encourage, I certainly don't want to be the one asking all the questions. Please send me a chat. You should be able to chat with me as your host. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. And I will begin by introducing our panelists in no particular order. So our first panelist this evening is Ms. Jacqueline Justice. She is the owner of JL Legal Services. She's a graduate of the University of Oregon. She has a wide range of experience. She's taught, she served as a law clerk. Presently, she practices in the area of child welfare, dependency, Social Security, disability, and employment. Before she opened her own office, almost 3 years ago, she worked for the Social Security Administrator as an attorney advisor. She's very involved with P.A.D, as most of our panelists this evening are. So I won't spend time highlighting her P.A.D involvement, but I will assure you that she and all our other panelists are actively involved. Moving on, our next panelist, Jason Haber. He is the managing partner for Haber and Blank, LLP. He focuses his practice on civil litigation, family and matrimonial law, business transaction, real estate, litigation, community transactions, community association law, PI claims, so personal injury, probate and estate planning, and appellate practice. So it sounds like Jason basically does everything but criminal law, which is a good segue to our next panelist, Brother Nick Lee. He is an attorney at law and founding member of Lee Criminal Defense. His practice is focused on DUI, DWI defense, as well as all aspects of criminal defense. He currently resides in Knoxville, Tennessee, and he's also very involved with mock trial, both with Phi Alpha Delta, as well as the University of Tennessee College of Law National Trial Team. And then our final panelist this evening is Jennifer Schroader. She is licensed to practice law in both Arizona and Washington. She began her career as a legal defender in Arizona. She now lives in Washington State, where she transitioned to private practice. She focuses primarily on family law matters. She, like Brother Lee, is also very involved with mock trial and has been involved as a participant, judge, and coach for P.A.D, as well as for other organizations. So without further ado, I'm going to start our panel. And I'm going to give you guys all a softball to start. So Jason, let's start with you. What made you want to start your own law firm?
So for me, I wanted to own my own business even back in law school. So that was kind of the path I was heading down. Almost did it straight out of law school, but ended up a job fell into my lap that was perfect and gave me a chance to kind of get the benefit of semi-working on my own a little bit, but under a firm. And I was there for 2 years and finally decided that's what I wanted to do.
Great. Jackie, let's go to you next.
Hi, and it's JJ Legal Services. I don't know if there was a typo on my sheet. I might have done that. But anyway, hi, everybody. I decided to start my own practice for the flexibility. You know, I've taken on a number of different roles throughout my career. And, you know, just due to some family stuff and my own working style, it just became necessary for me to have a little bit more flexibility. So that is probably the one thing I really love about working for myself. So that's kind of what I was looking for.
Great. Sister Schroeder, let's come to you next.
Hey everyone. So I think there are a few different reasons, but mostly, as Jackie said, for flexibility. Where I'd worked previously, most recently, I did have that flexibility, but also I had the ability, I recognized, to earn more based on the way it was organized and the way it was structured. And so by being able to have more of a say in how the practice was ran, was a really big thing for me, especially with the pandemic and everything going virtual. So that led to opening our firm.
Thank you. And Nick, what made you want to go out on your own and practice criminal defense in Knoxville?
Well, to preface that answer, just to have candor in it, I graduated in 11, right when the job market bubble was crashing, and a lot of people were not finding jobs, and a lot of people had to go and work for themselves out of necessity. And there's nothing wrong about that. Fortunately, I was blessed enough to have job offers, and I went to work for somebody first. And that was a well-established firm, and I seemed to be going places with them, and I liked them. But going back to sort of what you've already heard, I just had this romanticized idea in my mind of building my own law practice, doing it from the ground up, and it being 100% developed by me.
Great, thank you. So I think one question that always comes to my mind, I, full candor, am an in-house attorney with a major Fortune 500 company. I was in private practice for a number of years before that, but there definitely have been times in my career that I've toyed with opening my own firm for many of the reasons we've already heard. I think the one thing that has always made me pause and think better of that idea is money. So I think that's the one big question, how much money should someone have in the bank? How much money should someone devote to getting all the things you need to get your business started, whether it's licenses, insurance, taxes? And for this one, Brother Haber, I think you've been in private practice the longest. So I'm going to come to you first on this question again, but I promise I won't keep coming to you first.
It's fine. That way I don't have to repeat what anyone else is saying. So for me, I'll tell you, I started out with practically nothing. There isn't a set number that you need in the bank. It's totally up to you. When I first started, I kept expenses down, so I was able to do that. I did it at kind of an odd time. My wife was 8.5 months pregnant, I think, at the time, with our first daughter. We were moving within a month, and I just decided that was it. I set it up in the beginning of April, and by May 1st, kind of cut the cord, and I was on my own. I probably had net worth of very far negative when you factored in student loans. So it was that was a little scary. I mean, my wife had her job, so we had her income to rely on, but even that was tough. And then I remember one thing that happened the week I told my family I was going to do this. My uncle comes up to me and says, "How much money do you need me to stick aside just in case? Like, what's your monthly expenses for rent and all of that?" And I said, "Nothing, I'm fine." And to this day, the one thing I've kind of lived by was I've never asked him for anything. And it was always, what I'm going to make is what I'm going to live on. So don't go crazy, but at the same time, create a budget, work within whatever you have, and figure out how you're going to do that with that budget.
Great. Jen, I think you're our most recent transplant to owning your own law firm. So how much money did you set aside, and without telling us a dollar figure, maybe a monthly basis, but, where do we start, especially if you're going from, a steady firm paycheck to making it on your own?
So I actually did not go from a steady firm paycheck. I was always from, so we went, my partner Matt and I we were at the same firm, and it was basically you get paid based on what you bring in. So with the pandemic, things were really, really slow, and that firm ran like it was 1985. So we kind of just took our funds that we had from the last few months, and I think we started with like 20 grand or so, but we paid ourselves back already within, 6 months, 7 months. But Like Haber, we just kind of threw it in there and said, we're just going to do it and figure it out.
Brother Lee, you came from a firm before you went out into private practice. What steps did you take on the front end from a money standpoint?
This isn't going to sound like a money standpoint answer first, but it does loop back in, I promise. I went from a firm with these very nice offices, with this full established staff, with all these form libraries, with all the fancy books on the wall, to, okay, I've decided I'm going to go and practice on my own. What does that mean? A lot of attorneys have to do a P.O. box and just work from the courthouse, and nothing wrong with that, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to spend as little money as I could to make it look like I was as successful as possible. So you got to figure out what you need as an attorney, what image you want to project, and what that's going to cost you. And so I would look at that as your business expenses. And then you also have to live, so you have your living expenses. On the very low end, we've progressed so much virtually that basically if your parents will let you move into their garage and go off their Wi-Fi and you have a laptop, you can be an attorney. Obviously, nobody here wants to do that. It's been since 14 since I opened my own, so I don't remember exactly. I want to say I had maybe 3 or 4 months built up. I would have loved to have 6 months built up just for that extra cushion. But you got to figure out what your expenses are going to be, and you need to plan for, and particularly me doing criminal defense, a lot of work, especially at the beginning, is a point of work. You don't get paid for that for a few months. So you got to know how you're going to feed yourself until you start getting a steady income.
Great. I think that's very, very sound advice. Jackie, anything you wanted to add?
I think, for me, I knew I have enough space at my house that I can work from home if I wanted to, but I knew that that wasn't going to be the right choice for me. So like Nick said, I mean, you have your basic things, right? You've got to pay for your business license, and you've got to, do some basic things. But other than that, it kind of depends on the image that you need to project, or want to project, I should say. It is really cheap to get going these days. All you need is a really good Wi-Fi signal, and you can do, 99% of the stuff that you need to do, depending on your practice area. So I just think, give yourself a cushion, figure out what your goals are, and just work towards it. It's funny because I've heard kind of a theme, like everybody kind of started their firm. They kind of just into it out of necessity. There wasn't a ton, it wasn't like years and years worth of planning. And so did I. So there are a couple of books that people might be interested in, right? Like Solo by Choice is an interesting book that kind of walks through like just some basic things that you need. And I don't know how updated the editions are, but kind of different ways of thinking about building your practice. So, just kind of consider your options. Look at virtual, look at just getting a P.O. box, co-working spaces, or if you want to rent that high-rise downtown, that's its own thing, right?
Great. I think that's great advice. I'm going to use that Solo by Choice to kind of build on another question here in a moment. But before I do so, I did get a question in the chat. And the question is specific with respect to research costs. So Westlaw, Lexis, how much do those things cost when we're talking about a solo practice? Nick, let's go to you first on this one.
Well, I don't know how many state bar associations have that, but if you are in Tennessee and you join the Tennessee Bar Association, part of your membership fee covers a research engine. So that's pretty easy here.
So do you use, I'm a member of the Tennessee Bar too, full disclosure. So do you use Fastcase for all your legal needs, research needs?
Most all, but since I only do criminal and DUI defense, usually I'm pretty up to speed on the law regardless.
Fair enough. Jen, what did you guys do? Use Lexis, Westlaw, both?
So, so we also have Fast Case through the state bar, but there's some other organizations that have similar type things. For example, there's DRAW, which is Domestic Relations Attorneys of Washington. And if you're a member of that, they have a lot of resources and case searches. So I would look into various practice things. If you're part of a certain section, then they have other organizations that allow you to research, and it might not be as expensive as like Lexis or Westlaw. We did have Lexis, but we actually stopped doing that. We are part of Justia, and we do get the electronic desk books for that. So that's really helpful.
And when you guys did have Lexis, was that a monthly charge that you paid? Did you have one license or multiple licenses?
We had one license. It was a monthly charge, and I think we stopped it pretty quickly. Just we didn't really find that it was that useful to us.
Okay. I did get a message in the chat here saying that this Alex Carena believes that it's about $75 if you have Lexis for solos. Was that your experience, Jen?
Probably, maybe a little bit more. But yeah.
Jason, what about you guys? Do you guys use one of the big services? Use a smaller one?
I've been using Westlaw the whole time. I could tell you. I mean, we have 4 attorneys, so we're paying. It's weird. I actually know the number, $343.87, because I get the email on it. But I think when I was on my own, it was somewhere around 7 years ago, so 140 or 120, something like that. But it was we're in Florida, so it was just any state and federal in Florida.
Right. Okay. What about you, Jackie? Which service, if any, do you use?
So I'm a member of the Washington State Bar, so we have a lot of resources. And then, like Jen said, I'm a member of NOSCR, which is the National Organization for Social Security Claimant Representatives. A lot. But they have a lot of resources and keep you really updated. Similarly, with the dependency work that I do, there are organizations that touch on that sort of thing. Plus, we're a pretty tight-knit community, so people are constantly sharing resources. There are a lot of other ways to get resources rather than initially having to jump into a subscription that, may or may not be useful, right? Jen, you found that you didn't really need the Lexis because you had, other avenues to get the information you needed. So just explore your options as far as what your bar offers, what specialty bars might offer, or practice-specific organizations might offer.
Great. Jen, we did get a follow-up question for you.
Sure.
If you could again repeat what DRAW stands for.
Domestic Relations Attorneys of Washington. And so what they do is they have CLEs and organizations, but they come out with literally, it's like a Word version and a PDF version of every single subject you can think of relating to, domestic relations. And it has all the updated information, all the updated cases, and a lot of attorneys use that. There's also listservs you can sign up for. Jackie and I both are, I think, members of the Tacoma Pierce County Bar Association. And so your local bar will likely have listservs for your practice area. And so if you ever have any questions, a lot of times I'm a big fan of don't reinvent the wheel, ask others. So
Excellent. We have a number of questions in the chat, and I do acknowledge and see them. I think a few questions that we were about to get into. We'll address some of the questions we've received, and then I'll circle back on some others. But I think, as somebody going out into private practice, one of the things that I know you guys are all mindful of is building your client base and building your knowledge base. So that's actually two things. But I think they're somewhat related. We've heard some of you talk about the various specialty bars and your local bars as being resources. But what are some tips you can give our attendees as to how to build your client base and or how to build your knowledge base? And on this one, I'm going to start with Brother Lee.
I'm not sure if I'm the right person to ask about knowledge, but okay, I'll give it a stab. Knowledge base is going to be more difficult for some of my other panelists, not because I'm intelligent, but because I focus on one area of law so that I would only have to learn one area of law. And so for me, I learned that try to get down as pat as possible and just try to keep up to date. And that's just with new case law and making sure I'm in court most days so that I hear the arguments and I know how stuff's being used. Client base, I think I can speak to more because that's still more difficult for me. In that I made a conscious decision, nothing against people that do this, I don't pay for advertising much, if at all. I don't pay for radio ads, TV ads, billboards, etc. And you have to deliberate how you want people to come in your door. Certainly, if I paid for billboards, I probably have more people come in my door. I would be spending more money to have those people come in my door. But the reason I don't like doing that myself is because I prefer for Sister Nicole, Brother Jason, to be sending me somebody who trusts me, and so that there's already that foundation there. And I find that makes for a much easier life for me when there's already a sort of trust there. And so as far as my advertising goes, I have my website, which is passive advertising. That costs almost nothing. And so when people go and they Google you, then they will come up with your website. And I have my Facebook page, which is entirely free and for the same reason. But beyond that, I've just worked on making sure I do a good job day in, day out so that there's good word of mouth. And if anybody goes and looks online for me, they mention all the time, it's like, wow, I read your reviews versus some of these other people who might do billboards. And so people don't have that trust with them, that relationship. And so takeaway words, word of mouth, reviews, referrals is what I go with.
Great. Jackie, I saw you nodding your head a lot as Nick was talking. What is your number one tip for how to build your client base?
Well, I think for both client base and knowledge base, it's networking, right? It's joining those specialty bars. It's getting active and meeting people who are going to send you those referrals, right? A good chunk of my business, it's assigned work through the county. So that it's difficult for me to say, building client base in terms of that. But for my Social Security stuff, 90% of the clients that I've gotten out, so I'm part of a referral service that through a company that works with LTD carriers or long-term disability carriers. That's like a weird situation, but the private clients that I have, almost all of them are word of mouth. They're through networking, right? Or they're through referral services that I have become a part of, right, through specialty bars or organizations. I don't pay for advertising, but there are some free things that you can do, like making sure your website is up to date and continues to, look fresh, building your social media presence, even simple things like completing a business profile on Google My Business or whatever, and making sure your AVO profile is claimed. I mean, these are all little things that can increase your visibility and potentially bring in clients that don't really cost you anything. Obviously, it costs you to join the specialty bars or organizations, but there's a huge return on those if you're joining the right groups. So
thank you for that. Jen, any tips that you have for expanding your knowledge base or building clientele?
I would just say, pre-pandemic, one of the things that I would do was to put my cards in fish bowls, or like at the coffee shop where I practiced, where my former office was kind of a smaller suburb in East King County. And so there's a lot of local businesses there, and they get referrals and recommend people all the time. But I would second just what Jackie and Nick were saying about we don't really do advertising so much. Just keep up to date the free listings and free sites like Avo.
Jason, anything you wanted to add about building your client base or building your knowledge base?
Sure. So with the clients, a couple things. First, the way you treat people, not just your clients who are in there, because they're not the only ones who are going to refer people, but other attorneys in the courthouse, opposing parties, is critical, because you never know where that referral is going to come from. One of the biggest compliments we got was when an opposing party who was an attorney on a case turned around and hired us to do some other work for them down the line about a year after that case concluded. So that was always fantastic. The other thing is, they always say don't judge a book by its cover. If you meet with someone and something just seems off, something seems odd, and you get this first impression, it's not always right. So, about 2 years ago, I had a client come in, hired me to go to a hearing the next day. As I'm explaining how there's no way this is going to work out well, said, okay, let's go ahead and do it. He said, you don't know me, but go do it. I had no idea who he was. Turns out, pretty big real estate investor in this area. I still, to this day, now have handled about 15 different matters for him. So if I would have gone with my initial impression, that never would have gone forward. Definitely, I think the better thing was to go about the way I did. As far as new areas of law, that's something. So I've always had crossover with a lot of different areas, which is why the list of practice areas is so large. A lot of times, for example, if I do real estate, that'll run into association law, because South Florida, there's a million condos everywhere. Couple that with family law and probate, I do a lot of crossover between them. So for me, I pick up a new issue, just take the time, take an hour or two to learn a little bit, and then start going from there. Had some clients that I represented long-term on a variety of issues, and I would be just honest and upfront. They'd come to me with something, and if it was something that I thought we could handle, I would say, all right, we haven't done this before, but if you want to work with us, we'll figure it out. And next thing you know, I end up knowing these weird nuances and different areas of law that didn't really specialize in. So don't be afraid, but on the other hand, don't go too far. Make sure you've got the time to learn that you're not going to suddenly step in something you had no idea you wanted to be in. So just be cautious, but don't be afraid to learn it.
That's a good segue to one of the questions that we received in the chat, Jason. So I'm going to direct this one to you first. So when you're solo practice or a small firm, when you have a complex case, how do you decide when to outsource or when to bring someone in who's more seasoned in that area to maybe associate with on the matter?
So for me, when I was on my own, a little different than today, the very first thing, find out about the case, do that little bit of research, and then talk to other people. So when I was on my own, I'd reach out to more experienced attorneys, some people that might have been in different areas, to see how to handle it best. Now there's a few of us in the office, so we'll just chat about it and see if it's something one of us wants to handle, or have our paralegal do a little bit of research to just save some time. But at the same time, I'll sit more so and look at, okay, how busy am I? How many cases do I have? Do I have that time to learn something new? If not, we've got a huge network to outsource things to.
Great.
So I know yourself.
Yeah, I know our other three panelists are pretty focused in their practice areas. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to another question that we received in the chat. So one of our attendees prefaced his question or her question by acknowledging that they are a philosophy major, and then talking about the fact that several of you have talked about projecting an image. And so the question is, where did this philosophy come from? And how effective is it compared to substance and performance results? So Jen, I'm going to come to you first on that one.
Well, I would think that the image is more, my partner Matt is I'm not really one that wants to be in the spotlight, but he is definitely a fan. So it was important to him when we started to make sure that we had like a good website, and he wanted his face over it and I did not want my face anywhere on it. So I think that's important about having an image to people, because sometimes when you're in the courtroom and you walk in, people don't recognize you as an attorney, or they don't give you that respect, and they just think that you're a pro se person. And that's not something that you really want to have, especially when you're going in front of a commissioner or a judge. So it's really important to have an image of professionalism and clean, because if not, while we would like to think that people don't look at that against you, the reality is they do. Also, I can't tell you how many times when you're going into court, or even now since the pandemic, when I'm on Zoom and I'm dressed professionally in a suit in my office, and after the call or after the hearing, somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, I don't have an attorney and I really liked what you did in there to represent your client. So would you be interested in taking my case?" So I think that that's very important. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. I think that's a great answer. Jackie, projecting an image, why is that important and how effective do you find it?
So I think you have to back up and start with who you're trying to attract as a client, right? If you want to do work for, somebody that has multiple real estate holdings or what have you, like Jason was talking about, they're going to have a certain expectation sometimes. And I think that is relaxing now as we, are in this technology age, but it's just a matter of understanding your client's expectations, your potential client expectations, and meeting them where they're at, right? So for me, I specifically represent kids, so they don't really care if I wear a 101 Dalmatians shirt to meet with them. However, right, if I'm meeting with the business owner, I dress a little bit differently, right? And I think the same holds true for your office settings, right? I because I work for myself, I take my dog to work. Not everybody is comfortable with that, but it's my office, so I'm not going to work with clients that aren't going to fit my particular style, right? So it is a matter of defining your ideal client. Like, number one, who do you want to work with and for, right? Who is that? And kind of going from there. And then what's going to meet your needs, right?
Great. So Jackie, before I move on, we did have a follow-up question. You mentioned a number of free advertisement sources. One of them was Google Business. Could you just list the others again real quickly for our attendees?
Oh, I think I just mentioned that, and like Avo, and then obviously, getting a Twitter, getting a LinkedIn business profile. So yeah, I mean, those are really, Facebook page, those are really easy ways. As long as you're using them properly and engaging with them properly, those are really good ways to increase your visibility and draw people to your website or your contact info so that they call you up.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Jason, I'm going to come back to you with this question. So it's very specific, and I think I want to start with you because of where you came into the solo world. So the question is, from someone who's graduating law school in the spring and is interested in opening up a firm by the fall, what would be some methods to get clients?
Start talking to everybody you can now. your classmates are going to be some of the best referral sources. Everyone says network at different bar events. That's great. Do that too. But it's going to take a while to build up the rapport with everyone at those events. So people that you're in class with now, not just your year ahead, year behind. When I started out, got quite a few referrals from old professors who knew that I went out on my own. And it was, there was a 2-year time frame between law school and when I went out on my own. And I kept in contact with a few of them, and they wanted to help former students. So to this day, I still get some referrals from them. Something else that jumped in my head before we were talking about books, I think we had Jay Foonberg come talk at convention, and he had a book, drawing a blank on the name, about practice management. When I saw that, somebody's holding it up on their screen. See, this is why I keep the boxes this way. I can see the screens. It's how to start and build a law practice. That was actually a textbook in a class I had. It was a seminar class on law office management. So we had to do a whole business plan. I kept that from my 3L year of law school and used it when I opened it up. And then he was at convention. I think it was 10 or 12 years later. So things like that, resources like that kind of help you develop different ways. But most importantly, just being out there, whether it's join a BNI group so that you can get into just a networking flow. That's the most important thing. If you're not networking, if you're not out there, if you're just sitting at home on your couch, it sounds great, but you got to be, well, now it's a little easier. You can do it on Zoom from your couch, but just get out there and meet people.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Jamila has sent me a note and saying that he's always happy to answer questions. So I encourage you, number one, to buy that book, but number two, reach out to the author. Tell him you're a P.A.D member, and he will definitely get back to you and give you some insight. Brother Lee, anything else that you wanted to share about how to, start your own firm shortly after graduating and how to build your client base?
To riff off what we were just saying, I think it was 16 which Foonberg spoke with us, and this comes from his book. And I've taken it to heart. If you're going to go into business, especially for yourself, make sure people know you're in business. They can't refer you cases if they don't know you're taking on cases. But as for me personally, I first took on referrals from my partners at my old firm, and then at the same time, but then almost exclusively, my client base for a while was made up of just court-appointed work. So if that's something within the field of practice that you're interested in, to make sure that you always play nice with the court staff and personnel, because they control so much more of it than you know. And once you've made nice with them, let them know that you are interested in taking appointed work. And if there's an appointment list, get on it.
Yeah, that's all great advice. Going back to what I think several people mentioned, having a good relationship with lawyers who are on the other side of the V, probably with the exception of what Nick does in criminal defense, is important, especially if you're doing business litigation, if you're doing family law. People are going to have conflicts. And when you have conflicts, I'm going to refer you to somebody I know is a good lawyer. I know who's professional. I know who projects that image that we've talked about a little bit. So definitely keep that in mind. I've had a couple requests for the name of the author in the book, so I'm going to send a chat to everybody here in a minute with that, so you guys can quickly add it to your cart if you're doing a little multitasking and online shopping. I did want to go to a couple more questions that we've received in the chat, and kind of sticking with some of the practice area themes that we've been talking about. One question we received was how we handle consultations with new clients. Are they free? Is there a charge? How do you go about doing that? Does it vary from practice area to practice area? Just how do you do that consultation process in general? And for this one, Jen, I'm going to start with you.
So we do a free 30-minute consultation, and we actually try not to call it a consultation because everybody does. To be a little different, we call it a 30-minute case evaluation. And we do that right now we do that strictly either by the phone or via Zoom. But we're contemplating for some reasons, because we are very busy, to actually move to charge for that. I think that's just a personal preference once we get to a certain area that a lot of people charge for the case evaluation. And that might be something that we're going to. But right now it's 30 minutes as a free case evaluation.
Jackie, how do you handle your consultations?
So for a couple of my practice areas, right, for my child welfare, I don't charge a consultation. That's not how it works. It's coin-appointed work. And for Social Security, I'm actually not allowed to, because that's all contingency and regulated by regulation. But when I'm doing business consultations, I absolutely charge. And I do half of my hourly rate, right? I give you an hour for half of it. And then sometimes I will apply that to any sort of retainer or business situation that we work out, just kind of depending. And the reason I do that is because my time is valuable, and I spent a lot of years studying and I am happy to work with my clients, but I'm going to get paid for my time, right? So that's just something that I fundamentally believe in. So getting paid for your time.
Nick, how do you handle consultations in the criminal defense sphere?
In the criminal defense sphere in Knoxville, Tennessee, if you're charging for a consultation, nobody's going to come see you because nobody charges for them here. And to expand that, I would suggest, from my limited experience, that it's going to change from area of practice to area of practice, from area geographically to area geographically. If you're the only one that's charging a consultation fee, especially, I remember we were talking about somebody who was interested in graduating this spring and starting in the fall. If you're charging a consultation fee and this attorney who's done 100 trials is like, no, just come on in and talk to me, then you're going to lose the client automatically. And then beyond that, probably if there's a tipping point, then it's just going to be how much you need clients at the moment.
Makes
sense. I will
sense.
say I have charged before, though, if it's going to involve some prep time to be prepared for the consultation.
Jason, what about you? Does Haber and Blanks charge a consultation fee?
We've never done it. I know some people around that do. I'm probably at times the king of wasting time. I'll end up from a 30-minute consultation to 2 hours. If they end up retaining us, and which most of the time they do, and we have the case, then all right, it was worth the extra little bit of time. But I've never just never charged it, never felt the need to change it and start doing that. There are some consultations that I get out of that I wish I would have, but it's made up for on the other end.
So a couple questions that have come in, which I think I've certainly have seen a lot more doing what I do in-house. I hire outside attorneys quite a bit throughout the country to assist defending my company. And so a question we've received is whether anyone has done any flat rate work or done any alternative fee structure work. So Jackie, I see you nodding your head, so I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, definitely. If I'm working, so sometimes I'll be hired to draft up employee handbooks, right? And that is, a project that I can estimate how long it's going to take to complete. And so it's really easy to do a flat fee for that and just say, hey, this is going to cost, $1,500 or whatever. Flat fees can be nice because they're predictable. I've heard, and Jen, maybe you can speak to this. I've heard family law attorneys that are switching to more of a flat fee structure, like if you go through various case stages. So it's a really interesting model. And I think the benefit of it is that it's predictable, but it's not always easy to do. Obviously, some projects are going to take you longer than others. So it's kind of an average. You really have to kind of get a feel for how long things are taking you and adjust accordingly. But it's not a bad way to be.
So Jen, that's a good question. I've got a number of friends who do family law and they swear by no flat rate work. So is that something you do, something you've contemplated? What things to look out for in your practice area?
So for traditional 99% of family law cases, no flat fees. But for something like a domestic violence protection order, generally, if you're the responding party on that, that's a 1 hearing. If it gets continued, a 2 hearing case. And so, I've done flat fees for something like that, or for an anti-harassment order. I do take the occasional criminal defense case because it's what I did for so long. But only misdemeanors, and most of the time it's related to something like assault or malicious mischief or criminal damage or something that has something to do related to a family law case I'm on. So for those, I do flat fees. And as Jackie said, I think that a couple people in the Pierce County area do what they're calling unbundled services for flat fees, but generally and typically, I wouldn't suggest to do it because you could get really screwed over.
Nick, do you ever take any misdemeanor cases on a flat rate? I presume you don't from a felony standpoint.
I take both. And that's actually, I've never heard of an attorney around here taking hourly for a criminal defense case. I will say that's usually because you know how most cases are going to go. And so, yeah, you might charge a little bit too little for some and it's made up by others. I forget the exact wording that was used in the question, though. I do structure my payments differently than some attorneys in that in Tennessee, if you're charged with a crime, it's going to start in a lower court before it gets to the trial court. And so usually the lower court handles a lot of the work and up to a probable cause hearing. And then the trial court will handle most of the motions and discovery and the actual trial if it gets to that point. So I do usually charge people just for the lower court to start with. And that's both because most people don't go to trial, and I feel like that's fleecing people who are scared if I did it that way. Now, I don't feel good about that. But also, a little selfishly, if I know this is going to be a problem client, I'm going to find out in the lower court, and I can then charge accordingly if it gets to the trial court, or just say, I'm not taking this.
Fair enough. What about you, Jason? Do you do any alternative fee structures or flat rate work?
Yeah, whenever I'm dealing with, if I can predict ballpark how many hours, I'd prefer to do a flat fee. It's like Jackie said, it's, the client knows, everyone knows what's going into it. I saw a lot of family laws hourly. We've also done, especially in business litigation cases, we've done hybrids where we'll do a reduced hourly and then a reduced contingency fee. So in the end of the day, we know we're going to make some small hourly fee, and depending on what the settlement is, or if we end up getting a judgment, then we know where we're going to go on the contingency fee. And then some stuff we do straight contingency. Personal injury, we'll do contingency. Business side, and a lot of people will call wanting contingencies on different types of fees. We always have to be careful and just evaluate, is there money at the end of the tunnel? Like I could look at a case and say, yep, I think we'll win this. But if I'm winning it against something that's uncollectible, then we probably wouldn't do a contingency.
Makes sense to me. So before we kind of move away from a lot of what we've been talking about here recently, I do have a question about the number of hours that you're spending in solo practice versus those of you, which I think is all of you who worked for a firm or an agency. So do we work more? Do we work less? Do we work about the same? Nick, let's start with you.
I certainly work less than if I worked at a big law firm, I'm told. How much I work week to week varies. There are some weeks where if you see me on social media, I'll be like every day leaving the jail at 10 p.m. There's other weeks where I'm like, hey, I don't have a lot of big stuff coming up. I'm going to let myself take off the morning. So working for myself versus large firm, I don't work as much. I don't get paid as much. And I like it, though, because I get to work as much as is necessary based upon the caseload that I took on.
What about you, Jason? For the limited amount of time before you went solo, were you working more or less?
I think I worked at a small firm. It was only 2 to 3 attorneys over the 2 years. So I think during those 2 years, I worked 3 Saturdays, and that was probably it. Whereas big firm, you're probably being there every Saturday. I couldn't even count how many times on Saturdays I'm working now, or I'm here in the office till now. It's almost 9 o'clock here. There was a couple of weeks in October of this year where I didn't see sunlight other than out my window from the office. I work probably a solid 2-3 hours on average more a week on now than I did then. And it's my own doing, just from taking on cases and the caseload. Every time I want to take a day off, my wife will argue with me. She's like, take one more day so we can go away. I'm like, no, I got to work that Friday. And then she reminds me that I really don't. So
Jason, do you think that's because you have more duties since you're the managing partner, or is it your caseload is more?
A little bit of both. So it depends on the time period. Every time I think my caseload shrinks a little or I have less to do on cases, I got to catch up on 20 other things and filings and other stuff. So yeah, being managing partner, I'm supposed to have a smaller caseload, and then I end up taking on more.
Jen, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit lately about how you're very busy since opening your firm. So do you say you're working more? And let's take the pandemic out of it. Let's talk about then pre-pandemic, the number of hours you're working a week versus what you're working now.
I am working more now, but that is like Jason, I have significantly more clients. I think when we started the firm, I was a little concerned that we wouldn't have enough clients, and it did not work out that way because we sent emails to all of our old clients, and then family law is you have the same clients for years and years sometimes, and they come back or they say, oh, I was just waiting until, something happened, but I really do need you for this. And so we were trying to be conservative with staff, and we weren't hiring at the beginning. But now it's to the point where we need more and more staff that we don't have yet. And we don't have the time to find all the staff. So I'm here all the time.
Jackie, what about you? Do you work more or less than you used to?
Definitely less, but that's in part by choice, right? One of the reasons I went out on my own is because I wanted that flexibility. Now, like Nick, I also don't make as much as I was making in my previous work, but there are weeks where, I sat on the couch on Sunday and got caught up on some administrative tasks because I'm the only one that's going to do it, right? So it's just about putting in the time that you want to put in to get the results that you want and have the lifestyle that you want. For me, my personal life is, I don't know, like I definitely work to live, not the other way around, right? So I try to really balance that out, right? I'm trying to get my time management down to the point where I'm only working half days on Friday, right? Like that's kind of my goal for this first quarter, to be able to consistently take off early every Friday. So, yeah.
That's great. It's a great goal. I wish you well in that.
Well, can I jump in for 2 seconds? Because Jen said something that we experienced kind of the last year and a half. One of the biggest things when it comes to hiring employees, don't be afraid. We would sit here and say we wanted to have a year's worth of salary saved up to hire a new paralegal. And we kept doing that. All we kept doing was delaying. And finally we said, no, we've got enough where we can cover these bills for the next couple of weeks, really, at the end of the day. And then let's go ahead and do it. So we did. And the return was so much better than expected. So, you got to take those risks and jump and evaluate it. And we were a little spoiled because we had the same assistant working for us for years. and then went through a year of multiple people filling the position when she left, and it was about finding the right person. So you got to take that extra time, and sometimes, and just that's the administrative side, figure it out, and don't be afraid to make mistakes with employees and who you're hiring.
Well, Jason, you are so great of a panelist that you actually answered a question that I was about to turn to, which was, how do you make those first hiring decisions, and how do you decide who to add to the team, when to add them, and how is that different from, maybe being in another firm? So Jen, I'm going to come to you on that question, because I know that's something you're trying to weed through as we speak.
Yes. So we like to say slow to hire, quick to fire. Sorry, but it's true. I think that we just really want to find somebody who fits in well with the culture and that we have here. That's not going to, get in an argument or get upset with one of the people that we have. So that's what I would say with that. We have already hired one attorney and an assistant. We've had a lot of interviews with different paralegals, but haven't really found the right one. So I think that's an important thing, that, as Jason was saying, just find somebody that's right and take the time to do it right. But if they don't fit, then don't wait around and see if maybe they'll get better. Maybe they hope and work and hope. And then by the time you know it, it's 6 months down the road and you don't have somebody that's a good fit.
Right. So Nick, as I understand it, you don't have staff. Is that right? Or have you had staff at some point and I just don't know that?
That's partially correct. Going back to what I was saying earlier, assessing what you want for your own practice, I ended up going with a smaller private office north of the city where I do a lot of my work out of, but then I have a virtual office that runs out of a very fancy place downtown where I have an office manager that's available to everybody. I have a receptionist that's available to everybody, and I have somewhere where I can meet clients and them be impressed by me affording offices. I pay a lot more than I pay. But other than that, the only people I've ever hired have been law clerks on an independent contractor basis as I've needed them. And I've been fortunate because I've only ever had to and have only ever hired P.A.D. members that I knew. So it was easy for me.
So if you want to do criminal defense, hit up Brother Lee and see if he has any opportunities for you. So we're a few minutes over, but I do think it makes sense for us to wrap up with what I would call a concluding question. If we didn't get to your question tonight, we do have your email addresses. I'm going to send out the remaining questions to the panelists who have indicated they would be happy to answer those. Maybe not tomorrow, but within the next week or so. And we'll send that out to the people who attended, as well as who registered and did not get to attend. Also, if you had to step out for different portions, I know law school classes are resuming for those of you who are students. I know it's the Tuesday after a long holiday for those of you who are attorneys. So this will be up and available on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks once Corey Freeman does her magic and makes it look pretty. But to conclude, I'd like each of our panelists to just share one thing that they wish they knew back when they opened their law firm that they know now. And Jackie, I'm going to start with you.
So this is actually the second firm that I've owned. I stepped away from my first firm to go into work for the Social Security Administration. But the one thing that I will say is just to keep in mind that it's a business first, right? You need to understand the business mechanics and your business responsibilities, and make sure you have a good, solid understanding of that. Just because I know when I initially opened my first practice, I wasn't quite as prepared as I am now to handle the business side of things. And I still struggle with it, but it is one thing that I'm constantly trying to remind myself of, that I am the CEO, I am the CFO, I am this, I am all of the things, right? And to remain cognizant of that.
Great. Nick, what would be one piece of advice that you wish you knew then that you know now?
I would riff off of what Jackie said, and my variation to add to it is often I find myself with my nose to the grindstone. I'm just trying cases, I'm doing hearings, I'm going to court, and then I look up all of a sudden and, oh, I've forgotten to bill for all my time for the past X amount of weeks or months, and that's not good when you're wanting to get paid. So make sure to prioritize not only what you've been learning in law school and through practicing law, but prioritize making sure you get paid, understanding what you're worth, and tactfully making sure you get paid what you're worth.
Great. Jen, any parting words of wisdom?
Don't have anything to add as to what Nick or Jackie have already said.
I know Jason's not going to let the opportunity to have the last word pass. So Jason, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
Nick stole mine. Other than that, you got to know when to say no sometimes or turn something down. You can't help everybody, even if you want to.
Fair enough. There's several of you who've sent me messages asking to connect to one or more of the panelists. We'll be sure to get you guys in touch with one another. Be on the lookout for an email from me giving you their contact information. But again, on behalf of the International Executive Board, the Executive Office, and all of tonight's panelists, thank you for joining us. This will conclude our webinar. Have a great evening, everyone.